All right, welcome to a Olympic hockey / hockey in general / Olympic in general episode of the Cochrane Show. My name's John Cochrane. That is my dad, Scott Cochrane. And Dad, I have a bold take for you just to kick
Bold
things
take.
off.
Okay.
Talent-wise, I believe that this is the best Team Canada, nay, the best Olympic hockey team of all time.
Really, you think that the 2026 Canadian Olympic team is not only the best Canadian team ever, but the best national team ever? Is this what you're saying?
Well, I'm just saying that because if second place will be Canadian as well. I think the top 4 or 5 teams of all time. Now you can argue the Soviets back in, was it the 80s, when professionals weren't allowed except for them. But in terms of pure talent, I believe this is the best team of all time.
There's no question that this is a very, very solid group they've got there. I don't know, John, if it's possible to call the current team the best ever. And here's why. A, they haven't won the gold yet. I don't know if we want to talk about today's game, but they were a whisker away from not even being in the semifinals. But even beyond that, how can you call? I think you have to look at the longevity of the players who make up the team. If someone were to ask me, as an example, how many Hall of Famers are on this team, I would say I have no idea because they're not there yet. So I would go as far as to say this is a great team they pulled together. I think the Canadian GM and coach have pulled together the right team for this tournament. I'm not there yet to call them the best ever.
Well, come on. Who is then?
1987, Team Canada at the Canada Cup.
Explain. Canada Cup, that's not even Olympic.
No, but I mean, that was the forerunner of what is now the World Cup. So just like in soccer, and other sports where you do the Olympics 1 year, then 2 years later you do the World Cup and so on. That's been in place in hockey, but before we had the World Cup, it was just called the Canada Cup. And that year, Team Canada assembled, without question, the most future Hall of Famers that have ever been on one team. I mean, when you've got Gretzky and Lemieux and Paul Coffey and Steve Yzerman, I mean, this was a team that was stacked in terms of Hall of Famers kind of thing. They also had the kind of team that was necessary to pull off the World Cup championship that year, beating the Russians in the finals. So I think that was the best Team Canada that's ever been put on the ice.
So you would take them over 2026, over 2010. You think that's the best team?
I think the 2010 team, I would stack them up pretty close to the 87 team. I just think that the 87 team was so much more well-rounded. They were big, they were tough, they were fast, they could skate, they had great goaltending. I would love to see, maybe in a computer simulation, the 2010 Olympic team against the 87 Canada Cup team.
Well, 2026, I mean, you've got Connor Bedard, who I think is maybe the most talented hockey player of all time. You might think Wayne Gretzky, but just in terms of his speed, I do think
faster than Gretzky. He's faster than Gretzky. Now, I might say, yeah, but he hasn't scored as many goals in one season as Gretzky has. And then someone else would say, yeah, but it was a more wide open era when Gretzky played than it is now. So, but I'm not going to argue about McDavid.
No, when Gretzky played, it was plumbers and construction workers on the ice with him.
He was not as fast as McDavid, but let's face it, it's not like Gretzky barely scored more than other players. Like 1 year, he got 212 points. That's double what any other mere mortal will get. I mean, Gretzky was at a different level. David, though, is a faster player, and McDavid has the ability to change the game when he gets on the ice. With Gretzky, sometimes you didn't even know he was out there, but all of a sudden he has the puck and it's in the net, or he's got it right on Messier's stick. So he was a different kind of player.
Yeah, we could go back and forth. I just think that players are a lot more, there's a lot more talent these days with the progression of junior hockey and college hockey and WHL, CHL. I just think players are developed far younger and they're coming NHL ready when they make the league. And I just don't know if that was the case when Gretzky played, but you're right. He was cut above.
Gretzky was 17 years old when he turned pro.
Exactly. The rest weren't. I'm not saying it's not Gretzky. I'm just saying the competition, in my opinion, even sticks. Like maybe that's a case for Gretzky. But anyhow, this isn't a McDavid versus Gretzky
Okay.
conversation.
Yeah.
So who did they beat today? Who did Team Canada beat today?
They beat Czechia, which again, back in my day, that was the Czech Republic or the Czechoslovakians. Things have changed since then. But man, what a game that was. That one was really exciting. Right down to the end, went into overtime, and Marner splits the D and puts the backhand in. Canada wins 4-3 and goes on to the semifinals.
That was a insane backhand. He just decided, I'm going to just go between these two defensemen and just flick it. But it had so much velocity on it, and getting in the top right-hand corner where Mama keeps the cookies. That's an impressive shot.
And one day people will say, well, it was 3-on-3 and it's easier and so on. You look at the Czech players who were on the ice, they were stunned that Marner cut through them like that. I mean, that was basically a 1-on-3 break. He beat them, and then he beat the goalie, as you say, with that incredible backhand. That's a goal we're going to be watching for years to come.
I'm concerned moving forward for Team Canada. Adam said today that Crosby would be back these Olympics. I haven't heard that. I don't know where Adam's getting his sources from, but if Crosby can't return, what sort of impact do you think that has on this team?
I think it has a huge impact in the locker room because he's the heart and soul. He doesn't have the speed and the wheels and the hands and all that he used to have, but he's achieved that status that only certain players in every sport achieve, and that is their very presence elevates the team. Just because, know the stories of Crosby. Everyone remembers the golden goal in 2010, Stanley Cups that he's raised. Like he's the guy that now everybody else looks up to, especially those young players. So just his presence elevates the team. His lack of presence, I think it could really hurt.
Dad, these days, those types of players are called the OGs.
Yes.
So can you
Yes,
say
they
it,
are.
please? Say it.
Do it. Sidney Crosby is the OG, which is, of course, ironic because, you probably grew up and I remember him as Sid the Kid.
Yeah.
His whole brand was that he was this incredible young player, and now he's the OG. That's pretty bizarre.
What else is bizarre to think about is that Lemieux, who's on that 87 team, played at least, was it one season with Sidney Crosby still?
It's
Like
amazing.
that
Yeah. You had the
from
youth of Crosby, how young he started playing, and the longevity of Lemieux having this incredible overlap there.
between the two of them, it's like 40 years of NHL experience. And
Yeah.
I don't know when Lemieux's rookie season was, but Pittsburgh has been blessed with riches to have those two players for the last however many years it's been.
Absolutely. What other team could talk about? Well, I guess you've got Edmonton, but between Gretzky and McDavid, there was quite a gap where they were in the desert there. But Pittsburgh, yeah, to have both of these guys back to back, never mind Yarmer Yager and these other players they've had in there. Yeah, they've been stacked for a
Evgeny
long time.
Malkin.
Yeah.
Speaking of Malkin and Ovechkin, I'm very disappointed. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this. Should the Olympics be as political as they are?
The short answer is no, they should not be, but they have to be. Like, I don't know how you get around it I'm not going to get into the political reasons behind this and so on, but let's face it, when you're in the Olympics, you're representing your country. So right away, there's nationalities, there's politics involved. I wish it wasn't that way, but I don't see any other way around it.
What a diplomatic answer you gave.
Well, think about it. Like, how can you, if the world just can't turn a blind eye to naked aggression from one country onto another? And yeah, there has to be punishment beyond tariffs and trade barriers and things like that. Yeah, I wish it wasn't the case, but I have no problem with politics entering into the field and saying, sorry, until you guys get your act together, you don't get to play in our sandbox.
I just don't think that political leaders, we won't talk politics too much, but I don't think political leaders say, ooh, our talent can't be in the Olympics. We better change what we're doing. I don't think it's sending a message. I just think it's sucky for the people that are born that nationality that don't have any decision making powers over what their country is doing. And now we're saying you can't participate in this global sporting event. And some of the top players, specifically Russia, right? You've got Malkin, Ovechkin, like that is just it. The hockey tournament feels a little bit incomplete without some of those powerhouse players. That's all I'm saying.
No, I agree with that. And let's face it, these tournaments that Russia has not been able to participate in, there'll always be an asterisk next to them. You know, whoever wins the gold medal this year in men's hockey, they're going to know they legitimately won it, but Russia wasn't there. And that's been true ever since Russia's been told they can't participate in these things. So I don't know what you can do about it. I don't think the reason that the IOC, the Olympic Committee, I don't think the reason that they're telling Russia they can't participate is to bring Russia to their knees. This is not going to affect change. I think sometimes it's just you've got to do the right thing. And in my opinion, it's probably the right thing.
And it makes you wonder, are there any other countries that are closer by to us that will ever get to that state as well? But we won't go down that direction.
That's a fascinating question, John. And you're right. We probably shouldn't go there now. But if you look at what Russia has done, there are other world powers who are perilously close to crossing that same line.
And not even, we'll put a end on the conversation after I make this statement. It's not
Okay.
even just in the last 2 years, Dad. Like you think about the last 15 years, even with different wars that have taken place and occupying different cities and nations. I mean, there's been these other countries' hands aren't clean. It just the I guess they're just more in line with what the IOC, is that what you said?
Yeah.
IOC is for,
Sure.
anyhow.
And the same thing by extension, while we're talking about hockey, in 2 years, there'll be another World Cup of hockey. And unless things change, Russia won't be in that either, just like they weren't in the Four Nations tournament and so on. So, yeah, it's even though I support the decision, I openly acknowledge it sucks from a competition point of view because there are so many great athletes that come out of Russia. And to think that they can't participate in the hockey tournament, it just sucks. But it's the right thing.
It's the reality. Now, what is Canada like right now? As it's one of the things I miss around, the Winter Olympics. I'm in Australia.
Yeah.
Australia was beating Canada medal wise, most of the Olympics, but Canada has taken reins over Australia. But what's the environment like in Canada? Is everybody tuned in? TVs everywhere have Olympics on, or has it been a bit under the radar this year?
Well, I would, okay, two or three answers to that. The overall feeling probably has been one of disappointment so far, but that's not unexpected. If you even go back to the Vancouver Olympics in 2010, Canada didn't start racking up a lot of medals until the last week or 10 days of the Olympics. And that seems to be the pattern here now. I think just the sports where Canada excels tend to be the one that medal later in the tournament, later in the games. So there's concern and some disappointment, but not too much hand wringing because we've seen this play out before. The other thing I think, John, that's interesting, the Olympics typically bounce back and forth, especially the Winter Olympics, between the Eastern Hemisphere, say Europe, and the Western Hemisphere, Canada, the United States, and so on. So this year, with the games in Europe, it means that all these events, especially hockey, they're taking place in the middle of the day here. All right. So when the games are in North America, like if they've been in the United States or Canada, everything's on in prime time. And so there's just a higher energy level because everyone's sharing the experience. This year, like today's game, for example, started at, I don't know, noon or something like that. Well, most people can't take the time off work. So you get the results and so on, but you don't have that sense of the whole country's huddled around their TV sets watching it together. It's a it's a different kind of energy. So there's some concern, but I think there's still a quiet confidence.
Well, Canada game for me was at 1:40 a.m. this morning, and I can
Did
tell
you stay up
you
for it?
I did not. If we make the gold medal game, I will crack open a Molson at any time of the day and plunk myself in front of the TV and watch the gold medal game. But until that
Absolutely.
comes, it takes me about a week to recover from those types of late nights these days. Really, I'm not
Yes.
sleeping, right? It's one until like 4. And
Yeah.
so there's no chance of getting any sleep at all.
By the way, I very much noted for a while there when Australia was ahead of Canada in the medal count of the Winter Games. Reminded me of years ago. In fact, it was just after the Vancouver Games in 2010. I was on a flight in Africa, and the fellow I was sitting next to was from Namibia. And we just got to chatting, and he asked me where I was from, and I said I'm originally from Vancouver. And he said, "Oh, the Winter Olympics are there." I said, "Yeah, that's right." And he said, "Namibia." He said, "We did very poorly." That was pretty funny. Not a lot of bobsledding going on in Namibia.
No, no. I can't believe Yeah, I couldn't believe that Australia was did you ever hear about that, speed skater in Australia that won just by default? Like, they were losing so bad in the finals, but
No,
every single other person like, he was so far behind,
right?
the skaters that were packed together all crashed into each other, and so
No.
he got the gold medal going around.
Well, it
It's
reminds me a little bit of, do you happen to remember Eddie the Eagle?
no.
So this would be back probably in the 90s or maybe the thousands. He was an Olympic ski jumper from England. And I can't even describe it. Watch for this guy on YouTube, Eddie the Eagle. England had no Olympic team in ski jumping. And so he entered. And because he was like the only guy, they said, okay, you're on the team. He never even put on skis before. So he'd go down the ramp and he'd just sort of jump over the end a little bit. But he was so funny. He became the darling of the Olympics that year. So yeah, every now and then guys like the one you're describing in Australia or Eddie the Eagle, they kind of bring a little bit of a spark to the Olympics.
Eddie the Eagle. That
Eddie
sounds
the
like a
Eagle.
great thumbnail for this. I'm gonna put Eddie the Eagle in the thumbnail for this episode because that's
And
perfect.
find a picture of him. He was really, really funny.
Yeah. So, Dad, question. I've
Yes,
got a
sir.
question for you. I need to remember what my question was. Oh, yeah, here it is. Question.
Question.
Should the Olympic gold medal count towards a NHL player's legacy? Here's what I mean. Say Sidney Crosby
Yep.
ends up winning 4 Stanley Cups, 3 gold medals. I'm not saying that's accurate. I'm just giving a
Yep.
hypothetical.
Yep.
Say Connor McDavid ends up winning 4 Stanley Cups with 1 gold medal. Does that impact how we remember these players? Or is it strictly professional? Strictly any
Hockey, probably more than any other North American team sport, is an international sport. And I say North American because I know that soccer and rugby and cricket are very global sports. But in North America, maybe with the exception of baseball, because they play some baseball in Japan and some of the Latin American countries, but essentially, hockey is a global sport. And so, in the context of hockey, yes, your Olympics and World Cup or Canada Cup, your international performance adds to your legacy. You know, we were talking about Sidney Crosby. Those of us in Canada who were there at the time, when you think Sidney Crosby, you're going to think of the announcer calling the gold medal winning goal. Sidney Crosby, the golden goal, right? That's the legacy of Sidney Crosby. And so, yeah, absolutely. In hockey, your overall legacy it's dominated by how you've done in the Stanley Cup, but it absolutely includes how you've performed internationally.
let me ask you, let me just add a caveat. Same thing. Crosby, 4 Stanley Cups, 3 gold medals. Let's say Joe Bloke from Latvia, whose team has stunk for 20 years in the Olympics because there's no other good. I mean, I don't want to put shade on Latvia. They're doing pretty well
Sure.
currently, but
I know what you're saying.
you've got no chance at winning that gold. You win the 4 Stanley Cups. Do you almost elevate that guy because like you came from Latvia and you've made it in the NHL and you were able to carry a team to 4 Stanley Cups?
It's a good question. But in my opinion, using the example you gave, someone who's won 4 Stanley Cups and 3 Olympic gold medals, he will always be ahead of the poor Latvian or whoever it was who might have won Stanley Cups, but didn't quite make it on the international circuit. I guess it's not fair, but I think, especially as Canadians, we revere, first of all, it's the Stanley Cup. That's the main prize. But man, if you've done well in the Olympics and in the World Cup and so on, that's going to be a part of your legacy, no question. And so the poor Latvian guy, he's going to be tarnished a little bit.
I think the big debate over the next 20 years once these players retire is going to be who was the better player. Was it Sidney Crosby or was it Alex Ovechkin? Same, similar time periods playing against one another, both dominated the ice in certain ways. If you were to choose a player that you think, now we're Canadian, so let's not be
Yep.
biased,
Yep.
who will go down as, let's say there's like a top 10 players of all time, who's higher on that list?
Now, this will sound like I'm contradicting what I just said, but I think Ovechkin. And he wasn't able to pull off everything he could have internationally because of what we were talking about before. Russia wasn't eligible to play. Maybe because he's Canadian, is a favorite player of mine. But Ovechkin, the sheer level at which he's performed at a high level year after year after year after year, that puts him in rarefied air. So I think that ultimately Ovechkin's going to get the nod.
Even though Sidney Crosby has won more Stanley Cups than Ovechkin?
I guess so. And, I could be persuaded otherwise, but I just think that once Ovechkin had passed Gretzky, he was in a different category at that point. Now, I would say that Crosby is perhaps the better leader. Just as we were talking about earlier, how he's at that place in his career now, he walks into a dressing room and everything changes. I don't know that Ovechkin quite has that, but on a pure legacy level, I think that because Ovechkin passed Gretzky in the goal scoring category, I think he'll probably be given the nod.
I think Sidney Crosby has one of the biggest what if careers. Because we forget it was against Washington, ironically,
Yeah.
the head injuries that he had that sort of tarnished his career for a couple of seasons in a row. I wonder what would he have won another cup, maybe 2 cups if that didn't happen? Because that was in his prime, right? Malkin's prime, that's Letang's prime, like, they had a dynasty going, but you take Crosby out with those head injuries, and that really, I think, put him in the back seat a little bit. I will say about Crosby, he wore the badge of the face of the league so well,
Yep.
right? I think that's what and I do think that's a nationality thing. If, Ovechkin is a Canadian or even American, maybe we look at it differently, but I think that's just the reality of the North American nature of the league.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, even though, of course, he played his entire career in the United States with Pittsburgh, he's still, as you say, he's one of us. He's Canadian, and he's not only worn his Penguins jersey with pride, but he's really represented Canada. I mean, really, it's been for, gosh, almost 2 decades now. He's been the face of Canadian hockey internationally.
Yeah, not just that, he's been a face of, like, hockey.
Yeah.
Like, you think professional hockey in general, he wore that badge, and I've got a question thinking about this. Connor Bedard, we're taking a left-hand turn here. Connor Bedard, was he the most overrated prospect in the history of the NHL?
No, here's what I'm going to compare him to. Okay, I'm going to go back into my day. Okay. Um, in 1970, I think it was, the Montreal Canadiens brought Guy Lafleur up from the farm onto their team. He had been a superstar in the Quebec Junior League with I think it was with the Voyageurs, and now he was on the big club. He was so hyped. He was this phenom that was just going to turn the league on its ears. And for 3 years, he did almost nothing. And then in year 4, it all clicked. And everything that they'd been waiting for happened in his 4th year. And suddenly he's a year after year 60 goal man, and no one could catch him and no one could stop him. So the point of that is that could be Bedard. I don't know that he's overhyped. I just don't know that it's clicked for him yet. Some guys do it right away. They storm out of the gate and they've just got it right away. That doesn't seem to be the case with Bedard, but I haven't written him off yet. I'd still like the Canucks to get him.
It's not his fault, by the way, it's the media, like, his comparisons were players like Crosby and McDavid. And so
Yeah.
those were players that had NHL impact in their first year, that they made a difference on the ice and made a difference for their team. So when you're getting compared to players like that, you don't expect a 4-year sort of feeling out period. You do expect instant impact, or even like, I don't know if he passes the eye test. I haven't watched a ton of Bedard, but where you can see, oh man, this guy's going to be an MVP, face of the league, face of a franchise type player. I'm not sure if that's been him yet.
No, I agree with all of what you're saying, John. And I would add this as well. He came into a rebuilding team, and like Guy Lafleur came into like a championship caliber team. So he didn't have to carry the whole team on his shoulders, right? And in a sense, Bedard instantly became the face of the Chicago Blackhawks, right? That's a lot of pressure to put on a kid. Like he couldn't sort of wait in the weeds and so on. He had to produce right away. So yeah, the deck has been a little bit stacked against him, but you can still see the talent. Like the kid is incredibly talented. He may just be a Guy Lafleur. He may just need a little bit more time to develop.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up, Dad, what is your prediction for the rest of the Olympic hockey? Is Canada going to get the gold?
Well, I'll start with my hope. I think what we all hope unabashedly is that it's another Canada US final. I mean, that's one of the great international rivalries in sport. You know, when the US and Canada play in anything, but especially hockey, it's just so fiercely competitive. And I think for years, those have been the top two hockey countries in the world. And like it used to always be Canada, Russia. Now it's Canada, US. That's what I'm hoping for. And if it comes down to it, okay, all my Maple Leaf pride says Canada would win that game 4-2. That's my heart. My head thinks it would be an awful lot closer. The US is a tough team.
Speaking of politics, I mean, the tension possibly that could be on the ice if it's a Canadian US Olympic, not even just on the ice, but like the narrative around the game. That's something that like a movie could be made after a few years later.
Well, that's what happened at the Four Nations Cup. And you remember in the first 9 seconds, there were two bench clearing brawls, right? Because of just what you're saying. I mean, it was ridiculous, but it was awesome at the same time. So the Olympics is a slightly different atmosphere, I think, than the Four Nations Cup. But man, there
Yeah.
could be a lot of fireworks in that one.
Especially being in Italy, right? Like there's none of that tension happening in Italy. But Dad,
Right.
it's been awesome talking some hockey. Gonna have to crack open a Molson Canadian over here and watch. I gotta watch one of these games live and just be a mess for the rest of the week. But anyhow,
It's probably worth it just for one game.
just one game. Gotta do it. Gotta do it. Anyhow, that's the Cochrane Show, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.